I recall trick-or-treating roughly from 6:45 p.m. to about 9 p.m. Going down one street in particular, the one I started with, since historically it's always been the street that my family always went down. And when I was growing up, and I always got plenty of candy from that street. And this Halloween was no different. I wore the same Cheshire Cat costume that I wore for that party at the Dakota some days ago. Only this time around I wore the gloves for the most part. With them on, I could still had my trick-or-treat bag, in this case a Wegmans reusable bag that was Halloween themed. I carried that bag on this arm. The left arm. And brought with me a flashlight Mom gave me. I brought my phone with me. So I could call my mom if need be. And Mom gave me a large-ish I would describe it as a sandwich bag, but it's not exactly a sandwich bag, but it is very similar to one. That bag was intended to put my phone in to eliminate any risk of me accidentally dropping it. But I generally just held it in one of my hands, along with the flashlight separately in the same hand, and that bag separately too, in the same hand where I held the phone and flashlight. Yeah, even though it was a typical, pretty cool, leaning towards the cold side fall day, as is typical for Halloween, I didn't feel cold at all. In fact, within about half an hour to 45 minutes of walking, stopping at houses that had lights on, generally, I felt somewhat hot in my costume and was mildly sweating. Because I wore a t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants under my costume. Because of the headpiece of the costume, there were points in which my glasses would be fogged up. And every street light would produce a sort of glare effect through my vision while wearing the glasses. There were generally enough street lamps and other lights that I didn't have any need to use either the flashlight or my phone for me to be able to see. Throughout the time I was trick-or-treating, I used my phone either to check the time or to take pictures of any Halloween decorations that caught my eye at the time. I also took a few selfies of myself in my costume. I didn't wear the feet to my costume, instead wearing socks and a pair of one of my pairs of winter boots. Because the feet by themselves didn't offer any protection against either a nail or broken glass. And it wouldn't be good if I injured one of my feet. Since I'll be on a family trip in a few days. The Crocs would provide some protection, but not much. Though the feet wouldn't fit over them. Of the houses where the occupants were home and gave out candy, I recall they had minimal decorations. I only really recall one house towards the end of my trick-or-treating going all out, of which I took a couple of pictures. And initially it seemed like a bowl of candy was just left out. In the open garage, there was a cardboard cutout of Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise with some kind of flashing projector, and there was some kind of light bulb over the bowl of candy. And when I took one from that bowl, I saw someone step out, presumably hiding behind the cardboard cutout or something like that. They were dressed as Michael Myers and carrying a sort of prop knife. And they stayed silent the whole time. After I took one piece. as I considered taking a second piece because the bowl didn't say anything on it. It didn't say take one or take two or anything like that. I was considering taking a second because I saw in the bowl there was at least one cookies and cream Hershey's bar, but I ultimately decided against it since I knew I was being watched. And I was the tiniest bit scared from the performance this person was doing. Just staying silent, holding up the prop knife in their right hand. And kind of maybe with the prop knife at hip height, hip to stomach height, something like that. And they just stayed silent the whole time. Generally speaking, I make sure not to pass through anybody's lawn since I think doing that is rude. Instead, I go through the driveway, even if that means going in between cars. And go through the front door pathway. If there's a bowl out, just a bowl left out, I don't recall seeing any bowls with a note written on it, but if I encountered any bowls with a note written on it, I would follow what the note said. If there's no note, I always take two. Except in that one case I described earlier. If a bowl isn't left out, after determining that the house has lights on, more than a minimal amount generally, I go up to the door and look for a doorbell. Initially, I was a bit intimidated, or maybe taken off guard by the Ring cameras some of the houses had in place of doorbells. But after a while, I figured out that those Ring door cameras do have a doorbell function. And after that point, I just treated them like doorbells, like traditional doorbells. I recall there being a few cases in which a house either didn't have a doorbell or had a doorbell that didn't work, in which case I would have to knock. Yeah, when stopping at a house, I ring the doorbell once, wait for a bit, and then only ring once more. Waiting longer than most because I don't want to accidentally ding-dong ditch anybody. Since that wouldn't be very nice. All things considered, I felt I got a good amount of candy and a couple snack bags of chips, something like that. This Halloween. During the first hour or so, hour and a half, I was trick-or-treating. I would sometimes encounter small groups of trick-or-treaters, other trick-or-treaters. Pretty sure all of them were younger than me, if they weren't a parent. And the parents don't really count as trick-or-treaters since they're just accommodating their children. I would say trick-or-treat generally at every house I stopped at, and I got a response from. I got some compliments saying that my costume was good, which I was glad to hear. I'm glad some people got enjoyment from seeing my costume. I enjoyed being a cat this year, essentially a pink and purple cat. Even though it's supposed to be the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, where I ordered it online from, it didn't seem to come with a face mask by itself to make it truly look like the Cheshire Cat. Thankfully, it didn't rain or snow at any point while I was trick-or-treating, though it was raining in the half hour or so before I went. as I was working on the triangle ball polystyrene drawing project in that area by in between the living room and kitchen areas, I recall around 2:30 p.m. Having some pasta, meatballs, and some pasta and meatballs Mom cooked, with some sauce and little balls of mozzarella thrown in. And I had that with a glass of milk, and then later had some of the leftover pasta and a leftover meatball around 5 p.m. Here's where I am currently on One Among Zombies. I recall crafting this towards the very end of today, sometime after getting back from trick-or-treating. And I recall doing the sniper promotion that resulted in me getting this target shot ability towards the start of today. Around the time I recall having some black and orange colored corn chips by the Exotl brand, I think it might be pronounced. I'm not 100% sure. This was what I was mentioning earlier. So chill.